Welcome to another Chester History Moment.
This is the original front door to the house, including the original hardware from 1787. And if we come in, the entry hall and the staircase are all original also, and the paneling is quite something. When we moved in, there was a lot of paint on things, and the paneling was pretty worn, but we've tried to bring it back. And you'll also see, I think Jackie just showed you the large door going into the rest of the house that's original. And if you look up toward the ceiling, Jackie, you'll see there's the old doorbell, which had a little cable that went to the front door.
I am here today at 124 Chester Street at the Dexter French House with the owner, Matt Stover. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Jackie.
Could you tell us about the house, please?
Yeah, well, the house was built in 1787 by a man named Tavern Webster, and he was about 22 years old when he built it. And his idea apparently was to have this be a tavern. And so for much of its life through the 19th century, that's what it was. But Webster owned the house until 1795. And in 1795, an eccentric character from Newburyport, Massachusetts, came and bought the house. And his name was Timothy Dexter. And he had made money in currency speculation and trading in the West Indies and whatnot, but he was very opinionated, and he liked to be in charge and sort of have people do what he wanted, and he was trying to get the people in Newburyport to name the street in front of his house after him and a few other things, and they didn't want to do it, and so he said, well, I'm going to leave. So he came to Chester and he bought this house, and he was sort of a grand character, and in Chester he decided he wanted to, pay to pave the street, and again have it named after him and so forth, and the people in Chester were not wild about having him take over the town, but they thought he was sort of an impressive person, so either seriously or facetiously, they started calling him Lord Timothy Dexter. And he liked that so well that he called himself Lord Timothy Dexter for the rest of his life. But Timothy Dexter did not last very long in Chester. He lived here only a year and a half, 2 years at the most, and then he went back to Newburyport, and maybe in another chapter of your history or the Newburyport history, they can talk a lot about Timothy Dexter's exploits. But as a result of that, a lot of people call this the Dexter House, and that's where it comes from. This guy who only lived here for a very short period of time, but he was notable.
But he was such a character.
Yes.
Who faked his own death because he wanted to see how many people came to his funeral. Do you think that happened here or in Newburyport?
No, that happened in Newburyport. That was all in Newburyport.
That's good.
Here, I think the most controversial story that may or may not be true is that at one point he was upset with his wife and he locked her in the cedar closet up in the attic, and the cedar closet's still up there, so but I don't know if that's true or not, or just legend. But after Timothy Dexter left, he owned the house until 1808 when he died, but he rented it out, and at least one of the people who he rented it out to had a woodworking shop and farmed the property and so forth. And then after he died in 1808, the property was bought by a man named Jonathan Bell, and then when he died in 1824, it passed to one of his brothers, Samuel.
His youngest brother, Samuel Bell.
Yeah. So, and I think you know something about the Bell family.
Right, the Bell family came over from Ireland and lived in Londonderry, and the first one to come over was John Bell, which lived in the house that is now Bittersweet Blessings, and Jonathan followed him
and bought this house. And and then Samuel Bell, after Jonathan passed away, owned the house. But he went off to Washington, D.C. as a senator. He was also a governor, a very beloved governor. And he is the one who built Senator Bell Farm and retired there.
So whether he went there or whatever, but a couple of years after he had bought the house, he sold it to Dr. Samuel Barker, who had married one of the daughters of Chief Justice Richardson, who lived in the house next door to the north of us here, and they lived here for a couple of years, and then Dr. Barker went to run a hospital in Boston, and they left. And when he left, the house was bought by a man named Ephraim Orchid. And Orchid Drive that's down below us is named for
I did not realize that.
And so, because all that land was owned at one time by the French family who later owned this house. We'll get to that. So he ran it as a tavern pretty seriously. He added a wing on the north side that had some rooms where people could stay. After Orchid bought the house, he turned it back into a tavern, and he was serious about it, and he put an addition onto the house, on the north side of the house, that had some rooms so that he could have visitors stay overnight. And the room we're sitting in was sort of the main tavern room for gentlemen, whether they were gentlemen or not. There are pocket shutters on the windows, and pocket shutters are terrific if you're sitting here drinking in the afternoon and your wife and your kids are walking by out on Chester Street, because if you're sitting at the table and you're drinking, nobody can see that you're in there. So we think this was for the privacy and protection of men of Chester as they were enjoying themselves in the tavern. In 1911, the house was bought from Susan Orchid's estate by Amos Tuck French. He had many ties to Chester. Jackie could spend hours talking to you about the French family. His grandfather lived across the street, and his great aunt had grown up next door, and in the Richardson house. So he was familiar with Chester, but once he retired as a financier and a banker in New York City, he moved up here. And this was ultimately where he wanted to retire. Amos made several changes to the house after he purchased it. One, in 1911, he added a sunken garden, a more formal English-type garden, and you can see that in the picture on the right-hand side. It's got the stone wall on the bottom, and then the white pickets on the top of it. Then in 1933, he moved his library up to Chester from the home he had in Tuxedo Park, New York. And there were 5,000 volumes in his library. It was a gentleman's library full of history and classics and poetry and whatnot, and he needed a place to put it. So the building to the right in this picture is the library that he had constructed to contain that. The other things that Amos did were, one, he made the house a little fancier, and coincidentally or ironically, he Frenchified it a little bit. He made it a little fancy and more frilly, and in terms of the decor. And then also on the north side of the house where the tavern addition used to be, he added quarters for servants and his chauffeur, because he had lots of people in and out of the house. He entertained frequently, so he needed room for some staff as well. Amos owned the house until he passed away, and in fact his funeral service was here. And he named the house, when he moved up here, Journey's End. and in fact, this is where he lived the rest of his life and where his personal journey ended.
Amos Tuck French is buried in the village cemetery.
Next, the house went to their son, Stuyvesant French. He came in 1946 and lived here until 1975 when he passed on. Stuyvesant had been in World War I and served in the Army, and then had been a very successful lawyer. Like his father Amos, who had contributed a lot to the life of Chester, Stuyvesant too supported many things in town, enjoyed working in his garden.
He is also buried in the village cemetery.
The house then passed to their son Peter, and you can see a picture of him here in the library I spoke about with some of those 5,000 books behind him. He decided that he would like to bring the house back in some ways to what it would have been in 1787 when it was originally constructed. And so he de-Frenchified it in the sense of making the rooms look more traditionally Georgian colonial as they were when the house started. There had been layers of paint put over nice original paneling throughout the house that he had removed, and changed some of the hardware that was not traditional. And discovered some interesting features of the house, including a old, very large fireplace in the keeping room. This was the keeping room where all the cooking was done originally. It's now the dining room, but you can see the size of the hearth here in the fireplace, and the pots for cooking. This is the original fireplace. When Peter did the renovation, the beehive oven had collapsed, so they've redone they had to redo the oven, and you can see the brick looks a little bit different from the original brick. When Peter decided to work on the renovation, restoration, he consulted with a number of experts around the state, and one of the things they were impressed with is this is a wonderful example of post and beam construction. So you can also see where we've got some exposed beams, what that looks like, pegs instead of nails. You can see the marks the carpenters used to make sure that the different framing members would match up together, and it's a lot of fun to go up in the attic and see what it actually looks like. So Peter finished his work. They had it done 79-80, and then he and his wife were back here from 1981 through 1998, when they sold the house to another family who lived here for 5 years, and then we bought the house in 2003. So we've been here for 18 years and enjoying this wonderful house. And we also have the original lock for the front door.
I love it.
And this is a new bar, but this is literally Katie bar the door. That's we don't have any other lock on the front door. This is another interesting original feature. This is one of the original doors from the 1787 house, and this door knocker is also of the same vintage. And if you go down to the MFA in Boston, you will see a door knocker that looks exactly like this on an old door in the museum. So we have our own little piece of the museum here in Chester.